Hi again. Welcome back. So, we are here again as a part of the series on leadership development, which I'm teaching in Lambton College for the course HCL 1204. Or Aj, chapter 1. The video was quite long because I also had to give you the background on things. But now we are into the chapters, so things are going to proceed a lot more quickly. This video should not be as long. But the idea over here is to introduce you to all the concepts that are in chapter 2. So, continuing our journey with leadership development in the tourism and hospitality industry. Um, Quick introduction before we get into the chapter. Manu Sharma. I'm a professor at Lambton College, which is where I'm teaching this course, but I also work for a charity here in Ottawa in a senior leadership role, senior management role, and basically an engineer by background with a lifelong interest in leadership development. I have done a lot of leadership specific mentorship and coaching in my life, worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm delighted to be here facilitating this for you through YouTube. जैसे मैंने पहले बताया था, the idea of recording it was to make sure क्योंकि कुछ एक students हैं जिनके visas time से नहीं आए, तो I'm recording this for them so that they don't get left behind. But other than that, this is also an opportunity for those who are interested in an education in Canada to see how a course on leadership development would be delivered in a college setting. So, the in-class sessions are very different. They're 4 hours. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of case studies. There's a lot of discussion because every single time we are talking about a concept, it allows me to go to the whiteboard and present it. So you'll throw a different tab, but still, at least we'll be covering all the necessary topics. YouTube channel, I'm only able to do this if I'm assured of interest, and the only way for me to know that there is interest is if you have subscribed to the channel. So that's a very humble request. Please subscribe करें और अगर हो सके तो notifications be on करें. With that, we'll get to the agenda for the day, which is chapter 2, and chapter 2 is all about understanding individual differences. So, in the last video, I introduced you to the book. The book is all about interpersonal skills development in a leadership context. As I have shared already before, it is in the context of a tourism and hospitality course. And now continuing our journey, which started with chapter 1 on the framework, जिसके 5 components थे, starting with the goal, looking at your reality, building an action plan, then looking for and soliciting feedback, and then finally through practice, actionable stuff that you're going to do. वो हमने chapter 1 में cover किया था. Chapter 2 is all about understanding individual differences. So as you look at interpersonal skills, meaning skills that you would need to work with other people, one of the core things, especially in the multicultural, multi-ethnic world that we live in, is understanding individual differences. So उस end पे, what are some of the things that we're going to be looking at? We'll get into it. So individual differences may, the most important thing is to understand is, a lot of us, especially when we are coming in to study in a Canadian institution, are coming from very homogenous societies. अपने जैसे लोग, अपनी language, अपने जैसे ही दिखते हैं, अपने जैसे सोचते हैं, values काफी similar होती हैं. So वो exposure to differences उतना नहीं है जितना यहाँ पे आके होगा. Like, this is a very multicultural society, multi-ethnic society. Also, in the society, there is a renewed focus on understanding people at a people level. So variety and complexity of factors जो contribute करते हैं to individual differences, will go into that. We'll talk very quickly about personality and the role of personality. कि कैसे personalities impact करती हैं, different people bring, even within those individual differences on ethnic lines, on preferences, that people have their own personal preferences, along cultural lines. Then within those groups, there's this whole idea of understanding people at a personal level, which comes down to understanding, appreciating, and working with their personality. Then we'll move from personalities to starting to understand that different people have different cognitive abilities, meaning the way people employ their intelligence and their abilities to look at things differently. And then finally, we'll get back to something that we discussed in the first chapter at length, which is the value systems. सो वो मैंने कभी बताया था कि दो एलिमेंट्स हैं उसमें. एक एलिमेंट तो आपके अपनी पर्सनल वैल्यूज का है which come from a very personal space, but there are also values that which come to us from the cultures, the environments that we are born in, that we grow up in. And इस course में you have an opportunity to really take the time to look at them, and which is not to say कि आपकी values ठीक हैं या गलत हैं, whether they are right or wrong, but it's more to look at it from a perspective of that in your life, you should not just take things for granted. And if there is an opportunity for you to revisit your values, you should do that. Yeah. So, personality types, they're determined by हमने पिछले session maybe we had looked at the 5 big personality traits. So the book introduces you to this totality of 8 major personality types, the 5 that we discussed last time, which were neuroticism, extroversion, openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. So those are called the 5 big traits. But on top of that, there's 3 more: optimism, risk-taking, and thrill-seeking, and self-monitoring. So इनको अगेन समझने की क्या जरूरत है? Why do we need to have a really good handle of the personality types? Or how does it matter? ये इसकी यूज कहाँ पे होगी? Where would you be asked about it? So हर जगह, all the way from when you are looking to find a job, where even the person who's sitting in front of you is going to try to evaluate your personality and see if the personality is a good fit for the company, for the team that you're going to work with. But उसको flip भी करें, आप भी उस टाइम पे उनकी personality देख रहे हैं. So I'll share an anecdote with you, but I think it's a powerful anecdote, even though it's coming from my own personal life. Early on in my life, after graduating from school here in Canada, I went in for an interview. और interview एक significant role के लिए थी, काफी responsibility भी थी उस role में. This was right after my MBA. So the position I was really interested in. I was very curious about it. Actually, almost a sense of desperation was there that I wanted it. So when I went in, the gentleman who was interviewing me asked me right away if I had brought a copy of my resume, a physical copy of my resume for them to look at. So I did have one. And I pulled it out of my bag. And as I was giving it to him, I asked him quite professionally, but quite directly, if he had a copy of his resume for me too. And he was surprised. So he looked at me and asked me what I was meaning to convey by that. And I looked at him and said, listen, I completely understand and appreciate and respect why you would want to see my resume. But by the same token, would it not make sense for me to understand who am I going to be working with? If you're going to be my boss, and the whole idea is for you to have the opportunity to evaluate me to see if I'm good enough to work with you, should I also not have the courtesy to be able to do that too? And to my surprise, instead of getting pissed with me, instead of getting unhappy about it, he got up and he went and printed a copy of his resume and brought it back. So right off, I knew the openness to experience agreeableness भी है, conscientiousness भी है, neuroticism थोड़ी, I shouldn't say थोड़ी, was on the lower end of it. And extroversion and introversion wouldn't have mattered, but optimism, risk-taking, and self-monitoring, सब थे. So so the point being, I said this out to the class last time around. If you go out to buy a sandwich, or if you want to go and try some Chinese food. We'll take the time, half an hour, to go online, read up the reviews, call a few friends, ask them what they feel of a certain place and a certain chef. But we'll never do the same in most cases where we're going in for an interview. We'll really look up the person. We'll really try to call up other people and ask them what the personality of that person is. But I think that's very important. So, just having an understanding of these 8 factors, understanding the 5 big ones really well, understanding where you fit in, understanding where people that you work well with. Because अगर आपकी एक्सट्रोवर्जन है और दूसरे की भी एक्सट्रोवर्जन है, then there's some potential clash. But the flip side is अगर आपकी एक्सट्रोवर्जन है and they're extremely introverted, then clash नहीं भी होगी, तो you're gonna have to find a way to encourage them to step out of their own zone. Because as I explained last time, extroversion and introversion do not have anything to do with shyness. It's a personality type. Introverted people, if you're extroverted, even if you're introverted, if you want an introverted person to step up and be a part of things in a very conscious and a defined way, then the onus is on you as a leader to create the circumstances, the space, have the right attitude, the right encouragement. So the bottom line is personality factors को समझना बहुत जरूरी है. It's very important for you to understand, for you to be a true leader in that sense of being able to create the right environment for people to have the right outcomes. Yeah. So as I explained, extroversion on the high side is outgoing, energetic, gregarious. On the low side is quite withdrawn, unassertive. But that doesn't mean that the person does not want to engage. That just means that the person has a preference for a certain kind of an environment. Agreeableness on the right side, on the high side, is warm, considerate, good-natured. On the left side, aloof, irritated, often irritated. Conscientiousness on the right side, thoughtful, responsible, dependable, would like to reflect on things. On the low side, impulsive, carefree. So just not like people on that end are successful accidentally quite often. And the problem with accidental success is when you will ask them to repeat that success, they often do not know how to do it. So doesn't really work in demanding environments. Emotional stability, neuroticism on the high side, which is actually a low score. Stable and confident on the low side, moody, tense, lower self-confidence. That's a very difficult personality trait to really master working with. And if you're able to do that, if you are able to work with the emotional stability side of things, if you have the skill and the tool set to really do a good job on that end, you'll be a very powerful leader. Openness to experience, imaginative, curious, and open to new ideas on the right side, on the high, and narrow field of interest. Want to do things that you already know, do not want to experiment a lot on the low side. So, again, take a step back as you stare at these 5 dimensions. Think about it. If I was in a leadership role, let's say you work for Fairmont in Banff. Banff Fairmont is a really, really nice hotel. Let's say you're working in Fairmont. Then how would you want your team to be? Like, would you want somebody to be on the right or the left? And so this has a relevance from how you identify candidates, how you engage them, how you interview them, how you train them, how you manage them, and then how you reward them and empower them to be in their own leadership role. It's highly dependent upon you having a good idea of it. So ये सब कुछ going back to जो मैंने अपने chapter 1 के अपने lecture में बोला था कि the technical language is very important. आपके especially in your early days in your career, if you do not have that technical language, you're going to be in a lot of trouble in terms of not being able to explain things to people when you need to explain it to them. Yeah. So 4 cognitive styles: extroversion versus introversion. We already talked about it. Inner world or the outer world is determined by your energy flow. Sensation versus intuition. this comes down to whether you are focusing on the detail, or are you just making decisions off the top of your head. So how do you gather information, how do you process information, how do you react to information, how do you make your decisions based upon that, thinking versus feeling. So this is all about logic versus emotions. So if you're more on the thinking side, your decision making is influenced by more of logic. You tend to look at the technical side of things, whereas if you're on the feeling side, it's a lot more emotional. Judging versus perceiving. The first type, on the judging side, people who often seem to have solutions and they come into a conversation with a solution in mind, versus perceiving it, folks who are really looking to understand the point of view of the person on the other side. And even though they may have a solution in mind, they want to make sure that they understand, what's the perspective that the other person is bringing to the table, and then they'll work with that. So इन चारों को स्टाइल्स को समझना और चारों की जो duality of dimension उनको समझना बहुत जरूरी है. Again, आपको कोई question पूछ सकता है along this line, like how do you make your decisions? Are you more on the logical side, or are you more on the emotional side? And if caught in that situation where you're asked that question, you don't have an answer, then you have a challenge. Yeah. So cognitive ability has all to do with your mental ability, and it's at a very high level. I explained this to the students in the class, and I'll actually make a note for myself to make a video on it. So this is the whole element of looking at things, moving from data to expertise. Data, and then it is information. After information, knowledge is created. Knowledge leads to wisdom. Wisdom leads to expertise. Expertise is where you're actually in a position now to go back to people and actually help them get to a certain outcome. So the idea over here is कि जो आपकी cognitive ability है, that allows to acquire and supply knowledge. So you're able to look at data and derive information from it. So the example that I give in the class is a pair of birds flying in a certain direction. When it is only data, all you say is, I see some birds flying. Information would be when you give it some context. I see a couple of birds flying in the northwest direction. Knowledge would be when that context is now starting to help you build some understanding of it. I see a couple of birds flying in northwest direction, and that's because winter is coming. So you're building knowledge that when you see birds flying in the northwest direction, then winter is coming. Wisdom is when you're able to actually take that and actually start predicting some stuff. So the next time somebody says, oh, there's some birds flying, you ask them questions saying, okay, were they flying in this direction, that direction? Were the two of them together? Were they in a line? So, and then when somebody tells you, you're able to actually look at them and say, by the way, I think winter is coming. And expertise is when you're not only able to do that, but you're also able to give a solution. We are also able to bring forward something which adds on to that building of knowledge, adds on to that sense making. So that's a very powerful place to find yourself in if you can be there. So I often tell people that one of the key things that separates people, in their success is their ability to recognize patterns. Yeah. So again, I'm making myself a note because I'll make a quick video on it. I think that's a very important skill for people to consciously develop, the pattern recognition and sense making, because once you become the person who is able to make sense in a certain situation, in a certain environment with a certain set of people, आपका जो leadership potential है, that gets automatically established. Your leadership traits are well understood, your leadership position is solidified, and then it's very difficult for people to move you from that. Yeah. So Prague theory of intelligence, Triarchic theory of intelligence, I should spell it properly, basically looks at intelligence in the context of is it analytical, is it creative, or is it practical? Analytical being more on the problem solving, creative being more on the imaginative side, and practical being on the adaptive side. Isko in a very a general way, the way I look at it and the way it was explained to me, which has stayed with me, is Apple ka example by somebody who was trying to explain this, that it takes three kind of people to build success entrepreneurially. And they said you need a hacker, a hustler, and a hipster. And the hustler was the problem solving, the hipster was the creative, and the hacker was the practical. And what they said was Steve Jobs and Ives and Tim Cook represented problem solving, imagination, and adaptive. With Cook being responsible for setting up the production, Ives being responsible for the design of things, and Jobs being responsible for the problem solving, which was looking at what people wanted and then coming out with solutions that were addressing those problems. So the theory of intelligence basically is all about you understanding what's your strength. But like I said, it's also a very powerful concept for you to have in the back of your mind when you're building teams, when you're looking to start entrepreneurial careers. Like one of the things that even I did in my entrepreneurial career was, wait, partner dhund lo. Like there was this fascination with finding partners, but not really understanding that what would those partners be doing other than bringing in functional skills. So problem with that aspect of things is then you have some gaps in the team, because अगर सारे के सारे partner adaptive होंगे या problem solving can't be होंगे तो creative काम कौन करेगा. So you really need to understand where you belong, where you fall. And the thing is, the three are not exclusive. So it's not like somebody who's good at problem solving is not good at imagination or is not adaptive. The more important thing is there's one trait that is stronger compared to others, and that's where your core value proposition is. That's where your core strength is. So it's more about understanding that piece of it. Multiple intelligences, I will not get into the detail, but basically it speaks of that within that paradigm that we just discussed. Also, there are different ways that intelligence gets manifested and intelligence gets expressed. So develop और deploy दोनों different तरीके से कर सकते हो. Linguistics में at a people level, at a musical level, at a visual level, at a naturalistic level. So it's just basically looking at and saying, listen, ये एक wheel है, इस wheel में जरा देख के you can actually get an understanding of where do I belong. So that two things. One, whatever it is that you naturally gravitate towards, you build more strength in it. And whatever it is that you're lacking, if whatever is the nature of your work is going to require that, then you're going to have to build that. Now, one very important thing to understand is you do not have to build all of it. You could actually hire people with that strength if that's what's missing in your team. पर आपके पास में इतनी अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए उस पर्टिकुलर इंटेलिजेंस की कि जिसके पास में भी वो है आप उसको मैनेज कर सको. Because there's nothing worse than actually hiring somebody and then not knowing how to manage them. Yeah. So emotional intelligence all starts with self-awareness. Self-awareness is social awareness बनती है, and also self-management. Self-management is from that self-awareness, what do you bring back to your own self? And social awareness is what is it that you carry into how you deal with other people, which is the interpersonal side of things. And the two of them then come together for you to really develop all your relationships around it, whether they're personal, professional, at an individual level, or group relationships. So again, a very powerful thing. But I think the most important thing over here to understand is an ability to, first of all, take a step back and just become supremely self-aware. जब तक आपको अपने बारे में खुद नहीं पता होगा, आप किसी और के साथ में अपनी रिलेशनशिप में जस्टिस कर ही नहीं सकते. Then वैल्यूज, इसके ऊपर हमने चैप्टर 1 में भी बहुत डिटेल में बात की थी. मैंने I shared with you how I usually have people coming from a set of 100 values to 15 to 5 to 3. What that does is, values एक ऐसी चीज है, we just take them for granted. We really never spend an intentional time. I got asked what my 3 values were, and I had to spend the time and think about it. Ki, what are my values? Yeah. So integrity, inclusion, and intentionality. So those are important things for me, and those are the values that I really look for. मुझे लोगों में curiosity चाहिए, मुझे लोगों में high integrity चाहिए, honesty चाहिए, and I am all for a fair chance. मुझे I have a really tough, difficult time in my own personal capacity looking at people who have been biased against. All humans are born equal, and we all go to the same place once our time in this world is done. मैं इस चीज में fundamentally believe करता हूँ, और and I believe that every human has and should have has all the capabilities in the world and should have all the access that they need to succeed in this world, to be able to deliver the purpose of their life. So वो मेरे अपने personal values हैं, बहुत strong हैं, and it's important for me to understand them. So अगर आपके पास में values की clarity होगी, तो आपकी ethical conduct, moral conduct, आपका professional conduct, आपकी decision making, आपकी modeling, both for people who look up to you, but also modeling in response to what you see in your role model. अगर आप अपने parents को देखते हो, अपने grandparents को देखते हो, अपने bosses को देखते हो, अपने siblings को देखते हो, अपने friends को देखते हो, and there's some characters, some values that you want to model, it's very important for you to know कि जब आप उन चीजों को अंदर लेके आ रहे हो, when you're bringing those things in from all these people who are around you, are you bringing them in to amplify things that already exist, or are you bringing them in because you don't have them and you have to build them from scratch? Because those two are very different things. If you're bringing it in to amplify a value that you already define strongly with, then the intentionality and the purpose on how you're going to get it done is very different than if you have to develop them. And finally, external impacts. How do you understand things, and how do you react to them? How do you process things? That all comes down to values. So employing values अपनी relationships में use करें. अपनी values के साथ में हमेशा guidelines बनाएं, set up experiments for yourself, have some assumptions in place that you can use in your that have your values at the core of them, and then you're constantly playing with them to see who can they stick with and who they cannot stick with. And similarly, आप अपने जो सारे decision making और अपने management के frameworks as they relate to your professional conduct, both in terms of what is expected from you and what you expect from people, उसमें भी values both important. And so in your personal space as well as your professional space, it's important for you to really employ your values. So is particular screen में the only thing that is being highlighted is कि different generations की different values होती हैं, and then there are stereotypes around it. So the important thing is both to understand what are those stereotypes and also to understand those stereotypes so that you don't let them lead your decision making. So इसको अगर simple terms में हिंदी में बोलना है कि उन stereotypes को समझने की भी जरूरत है, क्योंकि that is how the world makes sense out of certain things. But at the same time, it's also very important to make sure that you don't let those stereotypes, push you to make wrong decisions. Yeah. So इसके बीच में वो सारा element of baby boomers, then Generation X, then Generation Y, Z, millennials, उसका सारा है. And the more important thing is इन सबको याद करके रखना बहुत मुश्किल है. But the more important thing is कि आपके पास में एक framework होना चाहिए. You should have a way to be able to relate to them and to make sense of them. Yeah. Future food for thought, personality and job fit. Personality traits, jobs के लिए, I've explained it in detail. It applies on both ends, as it applies to you looking for a job, seeking a job, and working in a job, but also for people seeking and working on jobs under you. उन दोनों चीजों में, it's very important for you to look for it. Emotional intelligence and leader. We talked about it. It starts with self-awareness. आप उससे अपने social constructs बनाते हो, अपने decision making models बनाते हो. उसके करके आपकी relational जो effectiveness है, आपकी leadership journey में वो ज़्यादा, it gets the emphasis that it needs. Values in corporate culture. So इसमें again जब हम कई बार values का सोचते हैं तो हम अपने आप को अपने personal level पे ही सोचते हैं. But as I was saying, carry your values with pride. These are my values, and these are values that are important for me. One of the key things that I mentioned in the class was, लेकिन जो टॉक्सिसिटी होती है ना किसी भी रिलेशनशिप में, चाहे वो पर्सनल रिलेशनशिप में हो चाहे प्रोफेशनल रिलेशनशिप में हो, it stifles your life. It prevents you from living your life to the potential that you can and you should live it. हम सब इस दुनिया में कुछ करने आए हैं, ऐसे घूम फिर के निकलने तो आएगी. तो it's important in both contexts. Agar personal life mein you find yourself in a very toxic place, and toxicity is usually decided by a mismatch of values. Yeah. So usually, like I said, the वैल्यूज की अलाइनमेंट नहीं है, तो अगर वो आपकी पर्सनल स्पेस है, वहां पे भी दुनिया बहुत बड़ी है. द वर्ल्ड इज अ बिग प्लेस. there's lots of opportunities to engage with, spend time with, live with, build your life with, to deliver on the potential of your life. बहुत opportunity है, बहुत लोग हैं, 7+ billion लोग हैं, but it's often so difficult because we have not done the exercise of really understanding that this is coming from a mismatch of values. But the same is true for your job too. I used to see a lot more. It's not as much now. I used to see people who were really unhappy in their work, really unhappy. And hoga bhi aise sometimes on Facebook or on Instagram, or on LinkedIn, you'll see somebody coming by and saying कि वो फलाना आदमी है, उसने रिजाइन कर दिया, ढोल बजे, वो डांस करते हुए बाहर गए, and we will all applaud, because we all like those stories. But when it comes to our own thing, we'll often choose to keep on working in a job where our values don't align. Agar values align bhi ho rahi hain, it's important for your employer and for your teammates to understand that those are values that are important, and those are the values that contribute towards your satisfaction and your performance. So बहुत important है कि उनके बारे में बात करें. So इसके साथ में chapter 2 यहीं खत्म करते हैं. So key points again, we continue to establish the importance of leadership in tourism and hospitality. Tourism and hospitality में इन सब चीजों का, like I mentioned before, अभी हम interpersonal element की बात कर रहे हैं from a professional sense, but the added dimension of you also being responsible for customers and having to do the necessary to take care of them adds a little bit more of an onus on the interpersonal element of leadership development. जो इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस हैं, जो हमने सेल्फ एस्टीम एंड सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस की बात की है, सो सेल्फ एस्टीम क्या है? सेल्फ एस्टीम इज दैट व्यू दैट यू हैव ऑफ योर ओन सेल्फ, द वे यू थिंक अबाउट इट, आपकी जो अपनी सेल्फ परसेप्शन है. एंड सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस इज द कॉन्फिडेंस दैट रिजल्ट्स और इज हेल्ड बैक बिकॉज ऑफ योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ योरसेल्फ. सो ये जो सेल्फ एस्टीम का कॉन्सेप्ट है, ये बहुत ही ज़्यादा important है. It is absolutely something that you need to work on. In the class, I talked to the students about कि self esteem पे काम करने के लिए, again, आपकी self esteem अगर by chance, God forbid, you're in doubt about yourself, the only way for you to fix it is to take a step back, that deep self reflection, understanding the gaps where they are, and then taking the time to validate it. वो फीडबैक सोलिसिट करें, लोगों से पूछें, लोगों को ऑब्जर्व करें, वो आपके साथ में कैसे रिएक्ट करते हैं, आप उनके साथ में कैसे रिएक्ट करते हैं. But the more important thing is to then come up with a mechanism that allows you to re-emphasize with yourself, reinforce with yourself that उसका कोई reason नहीं है, that you're a confident person, you're a capable person. Maybe you're not confident if your self-esteem is challenged, but you're a capable person, आपका potential high है. Again, you're in this world to do something. As long as you have a line of sight on that, do that. So I'll give you an example. I came from India here for my higher education. My English was really good, but sometimes I would find myself, especially when I was talking to senior executives, doubting myself on my communication. अब उस टाइम पे इतनी maturity नहीं थी, which I have now, where if you are speaking good English and the other person cannot understand you, 9 out of 10 times the fault is not with you or your accent. The fault is that the person on the other side is not making the effort to really understand you. So इसको समझने में मुझे थोड़ा टाइम लग गया खुद भी, but what did I do? I didn't start doubting myself. मेरा confidence थोड़ा low था, but what I did was, यहाँ पे एक organization है by the name of Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters and I went and spent time with them in their club, which was at University of Ottawa, and it did wonders for me because now I was in a group that was actually trying to listen carefully, instead of people who's like, it's an excuse for everybody. तुम्हारी accent heavy है. Well, the thing is, you're not trying your best to understand me. अगर तुम भी यहाँ से Ottawa से किसी tribal area में चले जाओगे इंडिया में, वो वहाँ पे इंग्लिश बोल रहे होंगे पर तुम्हारी इंग्लिश उनको नहीं समझ आएगी, because they're just gonna look at you and say, oh, he's speaking differently, so his accent must be difficult. But if people were to hear carefully or were to try and put in the effort to try to listen, it's not that big a challenge. So the point I'm trying to make is अगर self esteem का थोड़ा सा issue आया, self confidence का, I understood where it was coming from. मैंने वो gap analysis किया. I went and joined Toastmasters, and they made me understand that the problem was not on my end. And once you understand that, your confidence comes back. Yeah. So that's an example of. And the other thing that I did for myself for a long time, especially when I came to North America, and this was in 2000, I came 24 years back. There was no internet. You couldn't talk to your family every day. Phone calls were really expensive. So there was really जो वो एक reinforcement होती है ना, positive reinforcement that comes from your family and your loved ones believing in you, that got taken away. So what did I do? I started talking with myself at the end of the day. Very quickly, after I would have brushed, I would look at the mirror and tell myself that the space I find myself in, the time I find myself in, जो मेरे साथ में चल रहा है, जो मेरे हालात हैं, वो हमेशा, they're not going to last forever. I'm going to be reunited with my loved ones, and it's just a matter of taking my time, putting in my best effort. अभी इस time पे my attention is needed on this thing, which is here, and I do not need to really worry about stuff that I know it's not going to last forever. So those are personal examples of, and again, I keep on saying that एक्सीडेंटली ये चीजें नहीं होती हैं, इनके लिए कॉन्शियसनेस और एक इंटेंशनैलिटी चाहिए, और वो कॉन्शियसनेस और इंटेंशनैलिटी आप अपने काम में लेके आए, अपनी लर्निंग में लेके आए. If you bring that into your learning journey, you will go far. So again, that's my email at Lambton College. You're watching this video, which I am making for my students. But even if you're not my student at Lambton College, if you are watching this video and you're taking interest in these topics and you would like to discuss something, send me an email at that email, and I'll be more than happy to engage with you. My best wishes to you and yours, and I hope to see you in the next video. And I actually think I'm going to record the third chapter because we've already covered in the class sometime soon. So I hope to see you in the next video sometime really soon. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.